What's up, everybody? This is Trey Biddy with HawgSports.com, HawgSports.com. Today on the show, we're going to go over this Arkansas TCU Texas Bowl. We're going to be joined by Jeremy Clark at HornedFrogBlitz.com. Get a little bit of an insight on the TCU Horned Frogs. Of course, Danny West is going to join us, talk a little bit about the game also, and some recruiting. And we're going to talk about all these seniors that are returning for Arkansas. All that and more on Hog Sports Live. All right, everybody, we're having a little bit of trouble with the stream, but I think it's okay on your end, so everything looks like it's working out. Now, before we get into everything, I want to remind you, of course, there's plenty of ways to watch and listen. You can always tune in on Facebook Live. If you haven't followed the page yet, go ahead and do so. Also available on YouTube. Be sure to hit a like or a thumbs up on both of those channels. Subscribe to the YouTube page, and be sure you hit the notifications bell so you're notified anytime we upload new videos. Also available on Apple Podcasts. Be sure to throw us a 5-star review if you have not done so already and you like the content. There's no better way to share, to let other people know that you like this stuff, to help us out, than to do those things. Also available on Spotify, Stitcher, anywhere else you can think of to find your favorite podcast. If you haven't signed up for our newsletter, be sure to do that. If you haven't signed up for text alerts, be sure to do that as well. And I don't know what happened to, there we are. There's Trey Biddy. All right. Let's get all the NASCAR stuff down. Arkansas has gotten a lot of good news lately. How do I remove that? There you go. Arkansas has gotten a lot of good news. Started with Myron Cunningham on, I guess this was the day before Christmas Eve. Maybe it was Christmas Adam. But Myron Cunningham coming back. This is a big one. All right. And, you know, just a few days later, we'll kind of combine these two. But Ty Clary also coming back and Myron Cunningham. So Cunningham's a guy that really had a decent shot to be drafted. In fact, the paperwork they got back from the NFL indicated that he probably would be. So getting him back is huge. 6'7", 325 pounds, a guy that really has just been carrying that weight 1 year. So I want to see what he looks like, you know, another year carrying that weight, being with Brad Davis, being with Sam Pittman. He's already 23 years old, so he'll be 24 next season. So he's a little bit older guy, and that's kind of what I was talking about. You know, with closing the gap with some of these teams, you know, like, you know, I've said let's don't talk about Alabama yet, but maybe some guys that, you know, some teams that Arkansas is within striking distance of, like an Auburn, LSU, the way they were this year, getting guys who are 24 years old, 23 years old in your starting lineup can help you close the gap from an experience standpoint, from a strength standpoint versus a team, you know, that might have some more talented older players who are moving on to the NFL, who, you know, basically leave a spot for, you know, a 19, 20-year-old to fill. So advantageous for Arkansas, I think, when you consider guys like that coming back. You know, Grant Morgan's another one. Grant Morgan will be 23 years old next month. 5'11", 222-pound, first-team All-SEC linebacker. Christmas Day, announced to everybody. That's a very Grant Morgan thing to do. Merry Christmas. 111 tackles, 12.33 per game. Great season. And this is a guy also, you know, who's a former walk-on. He's always had that chip on his shoulder, obviously, and, you know, finally gets to play a lot this last year. And, you know, which brings me back to 2019. Like, why didn't he play more in 2019? Like, and he did because of some injuries, but it's like they didn't trust him. And, you know, this year he plays and he's an All-SEC linebacker. Like, he could have played last year. You could have had a better rotation going last year. But anyway, Grant Morgan coming back. It's hard to blame him. You know, he had a lot. He's married, you know. I assume he's graduated. He's applied to med school. So you could see him maybe like taking his crack at the NFL. And if he doesn't make it, you know, he's got plenty of fallbacks, obviously. But you could see him moving on. But at the same time, to put all that work in and only have one real, you know, year where you're the starter, it makes a lot of sense for him to come back. I certainly I could have done that. Definitely. You know, I think people are in too big a hurry all the time. I've said this before, to move on to the next level. And really, if you ask most people, if college wasn't the best time of their lives, it's tied with that, with something else. And you can never get it back, you know. So stay in college, stay in school. That's what I always say. De'Vion Warren coming back, obviously that makes a lot of sense. You know, he's a guy that would have had to make a team, you know, in training camp, and coming back for a torn ACL, that's no way to enter the pro ranks. So De'Vion Warren coming back, that's a nice addition. And he's a guy, you know, And we'll get to Jaquelin Crawford too, but there's not a lot of shorter, shiftier wide receivers. Most of the guys on Arkansas's rosters tend to be like 6'1" or better. So Devion at 5'10", 186 provides a different change of pace. Had a really good year until his ACL. 15 catches for 278 yards is definitely a career year. Blake Kern kind of falls in the same role as Grant Morgan. It's a thin position, just like linebacker. Tight end's a thin position. He exceeded everybody's expectations this year. He's a former walk-on. He'll be 24 years old when next season kicks off. But, Arkansas needed him to come back, and he makes all the sense in the world. Being a former walk-on, really only playing, special team stuff, but really only contributing on offense till this year. So, of course, come back. You put all that work in. You could play a lot. TJ Hammonds is another guy. TJ's flashed a lot. He's only 22. He'll be 23 next season, though. But he's flashed a lot of times, but he hasn't been consistent. This is an opportunity for him to maybe get some consistency. Will he play running back? Will he play wide receiver? Another 5'10", 192 guy. I think he fits in best at wide receiver, but 6 guys that are coming back for Arkansas that are seniors that we know of right now. And then you get in Jaquelin Crawford, by the way, for the bowl game, and he'll be with you next season. For those who don't remember Jaquelin Crawford, former 4-star recruit who signed with Oklahoma out of high school, a nice get. He's a guy that plays whoever the most explosive player for the opposing team is. He's been that guy on the scout team for Arkansas. He's been ineligible until they lifted all that for transfer, so he will be able to play in the bowl game. Be interesting to get a good early look at him, but with him, he's not. I think he's a little bit taller than 5'10", but maybe right at it. I don't know. Maybe he's 5'11", but he's a guy that with TJ and with Devion Warren, can provide that shiftier slot guy, which I guess Traylon Burks has been playing that role too. So it's 6'3", 230, but it's nice to have some change of pace type of guys out there, and TJ could help at running back too if needed. I don't know that he'll be needed. I think you got guys like AJ Green who'll step in next year as a freshman. But still waiting on some guys, obviously. Sam Pittman says, there's a few guys that they're still working out. There's Jonathan Marshall probably be the biggest fish of all those. I think that's probably a guy that he was talking about when he said, we'll see how good a recruit as we are. Jonathan Marshall, 6'3", 317, had a great year. And really another guy that, he's played, but he hasn't been like the guy. And he was this season. But he's probably going to get drafted, I think, if he comes out. I think he'll really test well. Tremaine Carroll, Arkansas's former strength and conditioning coach, said he's the strongest player he's ever been around, which is saying a lot. So there's A.J. Reed, who'd have some competition at kicker this year with Cameron Little coming in, number 1 ranked kicker prospect in the country. Deion Edwards, a guy who hasn't played a whole lot but was injured pretty much all year. Micah Smith in the same category, both fifth-year seniors. Tyson Morris, I think if you're Tyson Morris, he's a guy that sat out from a transfer. He played at Central Oklahoma and redshirted. Then he had to sit out a year, so it's almost like he lost a year right there. So he may want one more year back at it. He's kind of right there on the cusp of being top 6 wide receiver. Jack Lindsey, why not come back and hold? I've mentioned before, you get to go to AT&T Stadium, Alabama, LSU, Ole Miss, and Georgia next season. Pretty good road trips for a holder. Felipe Frank's pretty much gone. It hasn't been said or announced officially. Maybe he'll do that in some kind of manner, but Sam Pittman has indicated pretty firmly that, it'll be Malik Hornsby and KJ Jefferson likely in the spring battling out. Dorian Gerald's a guy that I think probably won't come back, but I think should come back. Now, we've talked about the offensive line, like how big that is, because you basically got 7 guys with significant starting experience coming back next year, battling for 5 spots. It's a great situation to be in. Arkansas needs to continue to get bigger, and they've got some guys, like Marcus Henderson and Ray Curry, Jalen St. John, some of these younger guys who have been in the system for a whole year. Maybe they start competing. So you got the numbers, like he'd mentioned bringing in 2 older players with 2 of the scholarships they have remaining, like 2 grad transfers, but now probably we'll look at maybe bringing in maybe a guy with like 3 years experience, just a regular transfer, a guy who's playing behind an all-conference, an all-American type of player who needs a change. Welcoming a guy like that in versus an older player. So continue to build a little bit more depth. You'll have 16 guys as it is right now on the offensive line next season if nothing changes. That's the best they've been at, numbers-wise since 2014. Pittman would like to be a little more 17, 18, and he can get to that with a couple of more guys like that. But flipping over to the defensive side, man, there's so much in limbo right now because, first of all, Julius Coates isn't with the team, and I know they hope to get him back. I would think he's such a talent. Hope to get him back with the team. He's not going to be playing in the bowl game, but, him, all right, Dorian Gerald, who kind of indicated, kind of shrugged it off about coming back this year before the season started, but didn't really know about the NCAA forgiving it and allowing you to have a bonus year. So, he was injured in the first game, spent most of the good part of the season injured. I would think he could put together more film and come back. He was late and out of shape the first time he came. He really only started playing the last couple of games. 2019, he was hurt in the first game. And then this year he was hurt in the first game. Last year he missed the whole season, though. He played some this year. So, to me, he makes sense to come back, but I could understand, why he might want to move on. He's only been on campus for 2.5 years. So, but Dorian Gerald, Julius Coates, those are the two guys who were starting at defensive end entering the season. Those are your two starters at defensive end. So those two guys, Jonathan Marshall, and then Xavier Kelly. Is Xavier Kelly going to come back? That's a lot of guys on the defensive line, and it's a line of scrimmage league, and now you're talking about 7 guys on offense coming back who have starting experience, plus expecting some younger guys to push a little bit, and then, possibly 4 guys who classify as seniors: Dorian Gerald, Jonathan Marshall, Xavier Kelly, Julius Coates. Julius Coates would be the youngest, but he'd be the only true senior out of those guys. Plus what you have, with guys returning, and Eric Gregory, who really had a strong season. Isaiah Nichols. I thought Nichols really probably surprised a lot of people this year. And then some other young guys. And plus, with a couple of those remaining scholarships, they would like to go out and get just a straight stud. I think they want a stud pass rusher. That's where they really have lacked this season. I think Matayo Soli is a guy that could grow into that. Zach Williams has shown some promising things. That's 2 other guys who played a good bit this season. But Matayo has had a cast on his hand and needs to add some more weight. He needs to put on some more weight, but you don't want to take away that explosiveness. So Hayden Henry's another guy to keep an eye on who could add some depth at linebacker. So pretty good news so far. We talked about Jaquaylin Crawford obviously a little bit. Should provide a nice boost at wide receiver in the bowl game and, of course, next year moving forward. There's always these underlying stories like in more than half the games this year, there was something, whether it was Sam Pittman going, playing Georgia, or Felipe Franks heading to Florida, or Barry Odom facing Missouri. It was just one thing after another where there was some kind of connection, And this one, I guess, shouldn't be any different. Arkansas and TCU battle a lot in recruiting. There's a couple of guys that Darwin Barlow, Savion Williams, some guys that Arkansas was really heavily involved with. But really, like Sam Carter, who's Arkansas's cornerback coach, he was a Thorpe Award finalist, and he did it at TCU. So he's got a connection there. And then I guess another one, maybe on a lesser scale, would be Traylon Smith, Arkansas running back Traylon Smith, who is from Houston. So the game is playing at Energy Stadium in Houston. So he'll have a lot of family there. Obviously there's going to be restrictions, but he'll have a lot of family there. So that'll be good. Before I jump into getting Jeremy Clark on the horn here, who is with HornedFrogBlitz, he is the publisher there, does a great job at that site. He's going to provide a lot of insight. We got to touch on basketball right now. We're not going to have Curtis Wilkerson on, but again, Curtis has a new show called Hog Hoops Live. I think we'll bring that back probably. I'm not sure. It's kind of a cluster, right? Because we got this show going right now, and then tomorrow's the basketball game against Auburn, the SEC opener. That's at, what time is that game? I believe it's at 6. Yep, 6 o'clock at Auburn, ESPN2, Wednesday, December 30th. So I think we'll end up having that game, his show come back next week. But obviously that's a key game coming up. And then Missouri after that in Fayetteville on January, when is that one? 2nd, I think? January 2nd at noon. No, at 11 on CBS, number 12 Missouri. So basketball season gearing up. I mean, they're 8-0. They've steamrolled most of these teams, won by double digits in every game, and now the real tests begin. It looks like Arkansas has a good team, but we'll see. We shall see, won't we? All right. Jeremy Clark, again, does a great job over at HornedFrogBlitz, and him and Billy Wessel's over there. See if I can get him on the horn. Three rings.
This is Jeremy.
Hey, Jeremy. Trey Biddy with HawgSports.com. How you doing, man?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm doing good. Welcome to Hog Sports Live. I was just giving you a glowing introduction on the great job you guys do over there at HornedFrogBlitz. And by the way, it is $1 right now if you want to sign up for your first month over at HornedFrogBlitz with Jeremy and Billy Wessel. Just you two guys over there, right? Running the show?
Yeah, and Billy just joined us. Oh gosh, probably about a month and a half ago. Came over from the competitor, so we're glad to have him.
He's a former Rivals guy like I am. I've been over at 24/7 for almost 3 years. I guess in April it'll be 3 years. So, Jeremy, I want to just go over a few questions here, not steer too far off of our other Q&A that we did. But we talked a little bit about the COVID situation, and TCU seems like they're in pretty good shape. Arkansas also is in real good shape, according to sources coming out of the break, so that's good. Looks like we'll get – it's pretty close. I mean, everybody's got their injuries and stuff, players who won't be back, but it looks like we'll get pretty close to as full steam as these guys can be. I wanted to ask you about Max Duggan because – that's the guy that everybody talks about, and it just kind of seems like as he goes, TCU goes. Is that a fair assessment, you think, for the TCU offense?
Yeah, I do. I think if you go back and watch some of the games this year, he's making a lot of the big plays on the ground. He hasn't really had a great year throwing the football, but he's had some of those games. Iowa State was one game where he had a pretty good half. And a lot of people thought if he would have played the whole game, they probably would have won that game. But I think a majority of it does have to do with Max, but I think it sounds cliche, but I really think it really starts up front on the offensive line. They've had so many different moving parts this year up front, and really the last, I guess, about the last 6 games when they kind of turned this thing around is when they've been playing more consistently up front, giving Max more time to find receivers and obviously open the running lanes for those talented running backs they have. I think since the Oklahoma game, they've averaged 100 more yards rushing on the ground. So they've actually done a pretty good job here within the last 6 games.
You know, a trend that kind of should worry you a little bit if you're an Arkansas fan. Now, Arkansas has lost 3 games this season by a combined 7 points. The TCU has found a way to win their games. They've won 6 of 7. Is that correct? 6 of 7?
Yeah, they've won 5 of the last 6 games.
5 of the last 6,
since that lost to Oklahoma, they've won 5 of the last 6.
And Arkansas has lost 4 in a row, actually, heading into this one. So 2 teams going a little bit different. Arkansas is obviously, one of those games is Alabama, but they also lost some close games that they had a chance to win. But TCU finding a way to win. They got some nice receivers too and skill guys. TCU has recruited really well at running back in the last couple of cycles. Quentin Johnston at wide receiver is a really big talent. Just tell us a little bit about what we can expect with those skill guys.
Well, you talk about the receivers. Quentin Johnston, he's really had a nice season for a true freshman. I think he's just a few yards away from what Jalen Reagor was able to accomplish a couple years ago when he was a true freshman. But he's really become Max Duggan's primary weapon when TCU's offense needs a big play. Max has figured it out. Hey, I'm just going to throw it up to the 6'4", 6'5" receiver, and he's going to out-jump those guys and make some plays. And Johnson has he's obviously got a long frame. He's got jumping ability through the roof. And one thing that people don't really realize about him, he's really his speed is very deceptive. He's not a slow guy. He's not just your typical throw it up and that's how we're going to make plays. He can run by you as well, but he's made some good plays. I think if you look back, Tay Barber's another guy. Hasn't had a really big year this year, but he led TCU last year in receiving. So he's still a guy that can make some plays up from the slot position. They'll probably get him involved a little bit in the run game, jet sweeps. And Darius Davis, I think I mentioned to you on our questions that he's a guy that had a huge game against Oklahoma State. He was a big reason why the Frogs were able to win that game. He had almost 150 yards receiving against a pretty good Cowboy secondary. I mean, they come into that game as one of the better defenses in the Big 12. But they've got several guys that are really key guys at receiver. The running backs, as you mentioned, they have one guy out, DeMarquay Foster, a former four-star. He's been injured, but they still got four other guys that they trust fully. Zach Evans, everyone knows about Zach, five-star, highest-rated signee ever to sign with TCU. He's really come on strong the last three games, rushed for 200 yards in two of those games, and had a pretty good game last time out against Louisiana Tech. And the one guy that I would say that people really need to keep an eye on is a guy that no one was really watching before the season, and his name's Kendre Miller. He was basically a very low three-star recruit, only had UTSA, and I think one other G5 school, and really those guys were kind of looking at him as a linebacker, but TCU brought him in as a running back, and he's really excelled. And early on in fall camp, I was even being told by some people close to the program that, hey, man, Miller might be just as good as Evans, if not better. So he's a guy that had a huge game against Louisiana Tech as well. And that's just really, I mean, they have a lot of weapons to get the football to and allow those guys to make some plays. But, you know, it's all about what the defense dictates and, you know, which way they want to go about it, if they want to use that strong run game or if they want to try to make some plays with those receivers.
Jeremy Clark joining us. You can follow him on Twitter at jclarkfb247. He is the publisher of HornedFrogBlitz on the 24/7 Sports Network. I want to flip you over to defense because this defense looks so typical of Gary Patterson. And you go through the list of names, and I always like seeing how players were rated as recruits. And, you know, there's some guys that were rated well and stuff, but not guys that just like one guy after another that jumps out at you like we're used to seeing a lot of times in the SEC. But the word scrappy always comes to mind when I think of Gary Patterson's defense, that 4-2-5. Mathis, Wallow, Hodges Tomlinson, Mowering. I'm not sure if I'm saying Trevon Mowering, that name right, but all those guys were, I believe, all Big 12 this year and only giving up 350 yards a game, which is tough to do in the Big 12 with so many explosive offenses. Your thoughts on this defense and how they match up against Arkansas?
Well, the defense is going into this year. Everyone thought the defense would be the strong point of TCU's football team, and they had a lot of guys coming back, as you mentioned. Garrett Wallow coming back, Trayvon Merrick. Merrick is a hard name to pronounce, by the way, so I'm not going to give you trouble on that one. But you had guys early in the year. You had Corey Bethley go out, so that was a big loss at defensive tackle, and Noah Daniels, which was, I think, Pro Football Focus had him as the top rated cornerback early in the season. Just the way he was playing, he got hurt against Oklahoma, so he's missed a majority of the season. But when you look at their defense in general, and you look at the 4-2-5, they're usually successful if they have a strong defensive line. Whether that's defensive ends getting to the quarterback, whether it's defensive tackles being strong in the rushing game, their defensive line has really, just like I mentioned with the offensive line, ever since that Oklahoma game, they've kind of just flipped the switch. O'Shawn Mathis is playing as good as any defensive end in the country right now. He's had he leads. He's actually second since Iowa State played in the Big 12 championship. He's now second in the Big 12 with 9 sacks and I think third in tackles for loss. But the last 6 games, he's had 4 games where he's had multiple sacks. He's really started to get to the quarterback. And as I mentioned on one of my answers, Kari Coleman, a true freshman out of Louisiana, this kid had 27 sacks as a senior last year. And if this kid was 6'4", 235, he would have had more offers from different SEC programs, including LSU, which probably would have been tough for TCU to get him out of Louisiana if he was a bigger kid. But he ended up leading the nation for true freshmen in tackles for loss with 15. So Kari kind of just getting better in his game has helped O'Shawn a lot. Both of them have done a good job getting to the quarterback, and defensive line has just kind of been by committee. They've had 4 or 5 guys, including a couple freshmen, that have really come in and played well. And linebacker, everyone talks about Garrett Wallow, but D. Winters has played exceptionally well. And the one guy that I would say has impressed me the most out of everyone on that defense is Hodges Tomlinson. The name sounds familiar because it is. It's LaDainian Tomlinson's nephew, and he's not the biggest guy. Mm-hmm. He's only maybe 5'9", maybe 5'10". Played safety in high school, so he made the transition to cornerback once he got to TCU. And he's just really, no matter how big the receivers are, is anyone that watches Big 12, you know you're going to be facing a talented receiver every week. And he's just done a phenomenal job of shutting down those other guys. Burks is going to present a good matchup for him, but the good thing about Tomlinson is he's faced guys like that in the Big 12. He's faced the big, tall receivers. He's faced the fast receivers. So I'm not too worried about how he's going to play against some of the bigger receivers Arkansas has. But the defense right now, just to kind of make this long answer shorter, they've played really, really good football the last few weeks.
All right, Jeremy. I know you expect a low-scoring game. You predicted 28-20 TCU in this one, and I think that's probably pretty close to how it'll play out. I think it'll probably be low-scoring all the way to the fourth quarter. Appreciate you joining us, man.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
All right, Jeremy. All right, everybody. That's Jeremy Clark, again, with HornedFrogBlitz. You can follow him at jclarkfb247. That's going to be an interesting matchup with that cornerback, I think, and Treylon Burks. And I know that there are a lot of stud wide receivers out there. I don't know that he's probably faced anybody quite like Treylon Burks, who is big and tall and fast and elusive. He's just kind of a freak. So that's a key matchup. And then, of course, Mathis. This is a guy that's getting to the quarterback a lot. If 5 of their past 6 games, I believe he said. Wait, excuse me. What did he say here? I've got it written down. Anyway, the last several games, he's been getting at least a couple of sacks. So that's a really interesting thing to watch because Felipe Franks does have a tendency to hold the ball a lot, and they've got guys that can really get to the quarterback. So be interesting to watch those matchups. Can they get to Arkansas in the sack game? And then, of course, that matchup with Burks and Tomlinson. All right. What we got next here? I'm going to real quick review the keys to victory in this one and the burning questions. Arkansas's defense obviously needs to get back on track. They have not played very well these last couple games. Can Hogs contain Max Duggan? That is going to be a big secret for Arkansas's defense. Arkansas hasn't faced a lot of really great running quarterbacks. This guy is really elusive, okay? He is really elusive. He's a better passer than he was last year as a true freshman. He's just a true sophomore, but he can really move and get away from people. So that's going to be so big in this one. I mean, if you think about it, Bo Nix, Kellen Mond, it's not a lot of really, really strong running quarterbacks that Arkansas has faced this year for whatever reason. Which offense will we see from Arkansas? It's a good question. They've definitely been up and down. Can Jaquaylin Crawford make an impact? I want to see maybe see a guy that we could see in the return game or something like that. Could be something to watch. Have any new faces earned some snaps? All right, and the same things, when we get down to keys to victory, everybody gets real cute with them and stuff, but penalties, turnovers, special teams, injuries / COVID, those 4 things are going to prevail no matter what. And probably third downs, how you perform on third down is going to be a big part of it. Curtis always provides a bonus one, motivation. That's key. When we talk about bowl games, every year you see teams that just don't show up. Think they're too good to be there, think their opponent is beneath them, think they got snubbed from something better, and they play like crap. I thought Bumper Pool made a good point for Arkansas, and it looks like for TCU also that, they did go do their thing. They left the program. They came back. They had to all get tested, and a lot of negative tests. Came out really good. So that kind of maybe is a sign that, hey, everybody is really motivated to play this game. And Arkansas should be. First of all, these 9 practices that they got were very key. It's not quite a spring, but it's close to it. And obviously a little more jammed close together. But those practices are really key, especially for younger players, kind of getting a glimpse into next year, how things might fit out. They were able to scrimmage those guys a couple of times, so that's all good. All right. I promised Danny West we'd get to him about now. For those of you who don't follow Danny West 247, not Danny West 1 as the graphic is right now. I got to get that updated. But Danny does a great job for us covering recruiting. If you're interested in getting a HawgSports.com subscription, it's worth it just for Danny's stuff. He is our primary recruiting guy. Most of his content is VIP. So he does a great job for us. And he's going to do a great job on this little interview here.
What's up, Trey?
Danny.
What's going on?
How you doing, brother?
I'm good. Getting ready for this game, man.
Yeah,
Checking
I know.
out TCU. Pretty excited about it.
It's a big one. We were talking a little bit about, this matchup and, how big a win in this game would be bleeding over into next season, playing Rice, and then getting Texas in week 2. Hopefully all that stuff works out in Fayetteville. This could be a real launching point for this program.
Could be. There's a lot of momentum despite how the season kind of went down the final stretch there. It didn't end up a couple of those games got away from you, granted, right? LSU, Missouri probably should have won those games. And you think about the momentum you would have had at that point. But they've still got positive momentum, man. Look at all these seniors coming back. That can't be overstated. I think it says a lot about, the direction of the program. Obviously says a lot about how they feel about Pittman. A lot of good things going on. You've got a top 20 class. We'll see if that ranking holds after the final signing day, but just a lot of positive stuff. And you're right. If they could somehow get this one, man, it would be enormous.
I'm not going to take you down this path, Danny, but I just want to say I shudder to think what this program would be like right now with COVID and all this stuff going on if Chad Morris was still in charge. I don't want to go down that road, but I think about that, just with these players coming back, and I think about how many players were, like leaving the program under Morris and all that stuff. Just with these guys coming back, but just how COVID would have been managed under Morris, it makes you grateful that there was a change.
Makes you very thankful. That's right.
But I think you're right. I think this says a lot about Sam Pittman and the staff, with so many of these seniors wanting to come back and play again, because I don't know if that would have been true in the past.
Yeah.
So this is a big game, obviously, and with the way Arkansas ended things, and we've talked about this too. Like, they lost 3 games by a total of 7 points, all coming on kicks. Everybody that Arkansas faced, that you said, this should be a game, this should be competitive. Everybody from Mississippi State to Auburn to Tennessee to Missouri to LSU, everybody, it was a close game, win or lose. Now, I look, obviously, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, all on a different level. Alabama's probably on its own level. A&M on a little bit different level. Yeah. Is TCU more like, one of these other teams, Missouri or Auburn, or are they more like Florida or Georgia or Alabama or Texas A&M? I kind of think they're probably more along the lines of an Auburn or an LSU or a little bit different, I should say, in terms of like quality, because those teams recruit at a different level. TCU kind of builds their system, and has a great system that's worked for them for a number of years. But I kind of think they're more on that level, which is why I think, Jeremy Clark predicted 28-20 in favor of TCU, and I could absolutely see a score like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could too. Arkansas's got to get back to turning people over, man.
Like they did early in the year.
I think they've got 18 takeaways on the year, right? Mm-hmm. 13 of those came in the first 4 games of the year. 13. So you've only had 5 since then in the final 6 games there. So how do you do that? You're back to full health. I know injuries and COVID, simple depth issues played a role in some of that, but they've got to get a couple of turnovers in this game, and I think it would be really big to get them early in the game. You don't want to get behind 10-14 and be chasing this quarterback for the rest of the night, right? So in theory, I think, if you could force this guy to throw, I think it's easy to go that route when you see a dual threat guy, but I really think that's the case here. Try to force him to throw, limit him on the ground, and try to slow down those 3 freshman running backs, one of which I thought at one point might be a Razorback, Trey. Darwin Barlow. Remember that kid?
Yeah.
Get out of Newton, Texas. Shout out to DJ Dean. But, yeah, they've got some good ones, man. It's going to be a great game, in my opinion. I see it going down one-score game, much like Jeremy had it there. And, hey, I think it's going to be a four-quarter game.
Yep, I think it will too. So switching over to recruiting, Danny, Arkansas right now, I guess they've got 24 in the books for the class. They've got one left. They can move three forward, three ahead. So they basically got four. And Pittman has talked about, basically going transfer route with all of these spots, whether it's grad transfers or regular transfers, probably regular transfers of offensive line, grad transfers, defensive line.
Yep.
But you've jumped right into 2022 recruiting. You've started coming out with the big red boards for different things. Just tell us a little bit, give us a taste of some of the stuff you've been working on.
Well, we got such an early start this year because Arkansas filled up so early. And when I say filled up, they had, 19, 20 guys in the boat just about by the time the first game rolled around. So they got a head start, which means I got a head start. So with that, we're seeing a huge, really record high number of early offers for next year's class. So it's kind of a lot to keep up with, to be honest with you. And we're seeing more and more. I've got a list here, Trey, of 28 new offers that I'm updating in the profiles today, if that tells you anything. Not all of them are 2022. There's some 23s, even a couple of 24s in there. But I think a real shocker here, wide receivers is still leading the way in terms of extended offers. We've seen Ryan Rhodes lately go out and extend some new linebacker offers. Obviously, Sam Carter, he's a big offer guy too, so a lot of corners in there. But it's still early. I know a lot of people are kind of impatient with this in-state group, a really good one for next year.
Yeah.
They've got 3 commitments for the 22 class. I think that's a really good start, especially this early in the game. But, yeah, maybe try to get 1 or 2 more after the bowl game, get them in the boat.
All right, Danny, you got anything else you want to add?
That's it. I'm just about out.
All right, man. I appreciate you joining us.
Yep.
All right, that's Danny West. Again, you can follow Danny at DannyWest247 on Twitter. Does a great job. Again, that's just a small sample of the great content that he puts out on 24/7 Sports, HawgSports.com. And again, if you want to sign up right now, it's just $1 for your first month if you want to try things out. And it's a great time to sign up, or you can sign off for 30% off for your first year. 2 great options. Before we get to your questions, I want to remind everybody one more time, there's plenty of ways to watch and listen. You can always tune in on Facebook Live. Be sure to give us a thumbs up if you like the content. Also available on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to that page and hit the notification bell so you're notified anytime we upload a new video. Give us that thumbs up like there. Also available on Apple Podcasts. If you haven't taken time to throw us that 5-star review, please do so. Say something nice about the show if you like it. Let others know what they can expect. Also available on Spotify, Stitcher, anywhere else you can think of to find your favorite podcast. All right. This will be the last show before the Texas Bowl. I haven't decided if I'm going to do like a walk and talk. It's New Year's Eve. I might want to have me a beer or 2. So I'm not sure if I'm going to do the walk and talk after the game. I probably will. I guess it'll depend on how I feel. I don't think I can do it the next day because I'll lose that emotional side of it. So probably will. All right, you talked me into it. I'll do it. Matthew Lowe says, think we go after Takias Crawford again. That was more of a previous staff recruit, so I don't know if that would happen. David McDaniel says, Woo Pig Suey, Wilson Wood from hometown Sheridan, getting back the leadership of Morgan, Cunningham, Warren, and Kern is worth way more than talent that comes with it. Yeah, I mean, it helps. Just that veteran, older guy. I mean, we're talking about some guys that are going to be 24, 23, 24 years old. It's a big difference between a 19-year-old and a 24-year-old. I mean, Grant Morgan's freaking married. I mean, it's just a lot different. Spud Snyder says, Must Bust returns, War Eagles in trouble now. I can't wait to watch that basketball game. It'll be fun finally getting to some real competitive games you're real danger of losing. Austin Pageant says, Trey, how do we get pressure on the quarterback? I mean, to me, it's contain this guy. Don't let him escape. Don't let him get behind you. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what Barry Odom does. I mean, I think Arkansas has better potential to get to the quarterback, especially, like Mateo Soli, now that he's got his cast off, maybe he can get some pressure there. It hurts not having Julius Coates because I thought he was really coming on there. Eric Gregory's a good player, but they just don't have a pure speed guy. I don't know. I don't think you just drop 8 here, do you? I think if you can run a 4, of course, every time I said they should run a 4-man front, they put, they run 3-man down linemen the whole game. But I think they could mix it up a little bit with these guys. TCU is what used to seeing a 4-2-5 a lot, I guess, and in practice that's what their defense runs. With every offensive lineman returning, how much better do you think Arkansas will be? Do they need to recruit a JC transfer lineman to improve? I think I like Pittman's approach in terms of going after a regular transfer that's got some more time to develop. I don't know if you're going to find like a really great high school offensive lineman at this point in recruiting. So I think that's probably the avenue to take. But they should be a lot better. I mean, some of these guys like Ricky Stromberg and Myron Cunningham added 35 pounds in the offseason. That's a lot of weight. I've talked about like some of the other bigger offensive linemen in the SEC that are like shedding weight to get down to 320 or so, and Arkansas like packing on weight. I want to see what these guys do after a year of carrying that weight. And then some of these other guys getting bigger and stronger, really working on adding strength and stuff. And then some of these other guys, like Jalen St. John, that's a guy that came in at, 360 pounds and needed to shed some weight, To me, that's like you're going to feel lighter on your feet. You're going to feel strong still, but lighter versus, if you add 25, 35 pounds like Cunningham did, you might feel a little bit slower. Like, I got a little more power, but I don't feel quite as nimble, because he was playing at 290 last year. So we'll see. Daniel Stewart says, what it do, Biddy? Wesley Harris says, love this live stream. Appreciate that, guys. Randall File says, Whoopig Suey from Appleton, Wisconsin. How do you see the Hogs slowing down the TCU running game? Well, basically, to me, what Arkansas has to do is tackle really well, keep everything in front of them. Don't let them slip tackles. I think like back to that LSU game when Arkansas could not convert a third down, but it was the fourth quarter or halfway through the third quarter before they even got in a better situation than a second or third and 5. In LSU, they're falling forward, And so to me, you can't, once you make contact with these guys, you got to stop. And they've got some talented backs. They've got some really good running backs. But, Bumper Pool made a great point. It's like, we're facing elite running backs every single week. But to me, they got to get these guys down, and they've struggled at times in that. I go back to the Auburn game with Tank Bigsby. They couldn't get him down. I think the rain played a part of a role in that. But once you make contact with them, they need to be going the other way. They don't need to be falling for a yard or two more. That's how they get in those third and short situations, keeps chain moving. Cody Tober says, how do you think all of these returning seniors are going to impact recruiting and or player retention in regards to the younger guys sitting behind them? Well, I don't see a lot changing. I think it's a good sign that these guys are coming back, and I think it'll probably trickle with everybody. Like, yeah, I can come back, and all these guys get the year back. It's not just these seniors; all of them get the year back. So, I think as far as recruiting, I don't think it impacts recruiting because I don't think as a true freshman you expect like to come in and just play right away. I think it's better in a lot of cases to learn behind an older player. And with this, again, I've said I think this will make Arkansas a better team next year. I don't think all schools across the country are going to experience the same type of retention with their seniors as Arkansas will. So I think it'll make them a better team and therefore make them a more attractive team as far as recruiting goes. These guys aren't going to be there when this next group of guys come in to the program. So the guys who are there now are already signed, so it's just really a few spots left. So, maybe it impacts them a little bit with a grad transfer they might have been in on before on the offensive line. But as far as recruiting, it should only boost recruiting, I think. Grant Toynton says, who else do you think coming back and praying for Henry and Xavier Kelly? Both those guys would be welcome additions. Jonathan Marshall, obviously Dorian Gerald. Those are all guys to watch. Dorian Bobby Swain is not said anything yet whether he'll return or not. Adrian Jones says right experience will give us an edge over some teams. Avery Edom says I'll be happy if Franks comes back. I don't think you're going to be happy. Sam Kerr says love all the seniors returning, but who else is excited to see what spark Crawford provides at wide receiver in the bowl game? Wish he could have played all season with Pig. Yeah, I'm anxious to see what kind of guy they got out there in him. It's another Justin Stepp lure, so kudos to Justin Stepp. Done a great job recruiting at wide receiver. Avery Edom says, how many seniors do you think will come back? Right now, 6. I think we'll see a couple more at least. Adrian Jones says, Traylon Smith a junior or senior? Traylon is a redshirt sophomore. Grant Twinton says, we don't need Reed. He did not, to give Reed credit, he had a really good year at Duke last year, and this year he just didn't. Just didn't have a great year. But there's no reason not to keep him around if he wants to stay. The year's forgiven for him. Give you a little more competition at kicker. That's not a bad thing, is it? Cedric White says, is Bush lack of play due to injuries or talent bust? He's had a shoulder injury all year. He's only played in 2 games. Anthony Biggs, Footser Jr., says, is coach still on the team right now? He's not. Avery Edom says, who's playing quarterback against TCU? That'll be Felipe Franks. Marco Giles says, Trey, if you could choose who Arkansas would stomp a mud hole in next year, which team would you most want it to be? I think I would probably speak for Arkansas fans. Mostly, is Auburn still the same? Is it still the same, like, take that, Auburn, if Gus and Chad aren't there? I don't know. Texas A&M, I think a lot of fans would probably pick Texas A&M just because of the way that series has gone lately. But Anthony Biggs Foots Jr. says, I'll answer for him, Auburn. Probably one of those two. Grant Toynton says, who do you think the 4 scholarships go towards? 1 left this year and push 3 forward. I think Pittman made it clear yesterday. I asked him about it. He said, probably still looking at offensive line, but maybe not grad transfers, maybe more guys that have some eligibility left after next season, and then still defensive line. And I agree with him. I wouldn't mind. If there's a great linebacker out there who could help you, but you get Levi Draper back, who you recruited from OU last year. He's going to be healthy. He was injured in the first game. Grant Morgan's coming back. Bumper Poole will be back. And Hayden Henry possibly. So I guess it just depends. Tight end's another position, but you get Blake Kern back. So maybe you just turn your attention to recruiting a real stud tight end in the next recruiting cycle out of the high school ranks. Any additional seniors deciding to return? I think we covered that, Butch Joyner. The Butcher. I just gave you a nickname, Butch. The Butcher. On accident. That's how great nicknames come about and inventions. Cedric White says, Trey, what's your honest opinion of Clark? I think he's better suited as a safety as opposed to corner. Hudson Clark. Yeah, I think there were some examples. Now, first of all, Arkansas didn't win the Ole Miss game. Hudson's caught some flack this year since the Ole Miss game, but Arkansas didn't win that game without him, okay? So let's put that out there. But secondly, yeah, maybe safety. Maybe wouldn't mind seeing him get a crack over there. I think there were some examples this year where, from a speed standpoint, some guys, burned him pretty good. So he struggled, I thought, a lot of times with some double moves. But, maybe safety. Maybe give him a crack there. Maybe the hybrid spot, the outside linebacker spot. But he provides some depth at corner too. So maybe work him at all spots. Who knows? Billy Wooten says, LS who? Cedric White says, believe it's time for KJ or Horns to take the lead, plus more suited for Brow's offense. Frank has nothing to gain staying. Yeah, this one game, obviously, for Franks, but I think a lot of people are intrigued to see what happens. But Franks was key to Arkansas' success this year. Happy belated birthday, Felipe. Lisa Cup Hancock says, why does TCU feel like Arkansas is not a worthy opponent? I don't, some fans on the TCU board have kind of expressed that, but it's just their opinion, man. But I think you probably just go back to what Arkansas has done the last couple of years. They've been terrible until this season. I think you just glance at their record and they only have 3 wins, but, probably that's how it looks on the surface, but 3 losses by 7 points, including the Auburn game that they were completely robbed of. They were a lot more competitive team this year, and it's going to be a close game. Arkansas 55, TCU 14, SEC tough. I don't know about that. That would have to be TCU like acting like some of the fans have, and that it's just going to be a rout, and Arkansas doesn't deserve to play TCU. They would have to come in with that attitude to get spanked like that. Lisa Cup Hancock says Arkansas 35, TCU 21. Man, Traylon will kick that little dude's butt if they play man-to-man. He's a good player. I don't doubt that, and I don't doubt that he's faced some really good wide receivers. But I am anxious to see anybody successfully cover Traylon Burks. I'm not anxious to see that, but I'm curious to see if anybody can do it on the college level. Patrick Germany says, do you think Frank's coming back for another year? No. Adrian Jones says special teams is garbage right now. Yep. I mean, when you factor in a few things, TCU's been solid on special teams. I think they got an all Big 12 punter, but they've been solid on special teams. They've got a little bit more continuity, I guess, with the program, with Gary Patterson, a lot more. I mean, he's been there forever. Special teams for Arkansas has been atrocious. You cannot lose special teams in this game, in my opinion, with everything, probably going to be so tight. And that's what's cost them. I mean, those 3 games we talked about by combined 7 points, block kick, field goal. Those are how those 3 games were won. So special teams has cost Arkansas 3 games this season. Straight up cost them. I mean, the Auburn game was robbed, but ultimately it was a kick. Aaron Serrett says, we have to be able to run the ball. We need at least 100 yards on the ground. We need short third down. Third down is going to be so key. They've really, really crippled Arkansas, both sides of the ball in some of these games. We need short third downs to complete at least 50%. Score 35-plus points to win. Our defense will only be able to hold them for so long. Hopefully Franks will get off to a good start. Pittman says that Arkansas will be as good from a numbers standpoint as they've been since the opener. And really they were playing pretty solid defense for the most part. I mean, think about how they played that first 3 quarters or so against Georgia and how they played against Mississippi State, who had just went off on LSU. I thought Pittman made a good point too, like towards the end of the year with all the injuries that they had and the struggles with COVID and stuff, they lost to some teams he felt like they would have taken care of if they'd played them earlier in the year. And I think he's probably right. Casey French, Fulton, True Frierson, responding to True Frierson. I hope you're right. I have a TCU buddy that's rubbing it in good. Why would you be rubbing it in before the game starts? That's asking for it. Kyle Curry says, I'm most intrigued to see this team line up against an opponent from another Power 5 conference. Trey, on which side of the ball, if either, do you think the Hogs have the best chance to break out in this game? Well, I think offensively, even though TCU's defense is pretty scrappy and plays pretty sound, only giving up 35 points a game, 350 yards per game. Wow, there's my brain going. I guess I must be hitting that 50-minute mark. The brain's starting to go. But I think Arkansas's offense has a chance to do some really good things. They did it in the Missouri game even without Felipe Franks. So we'll see. Alabama was tough. That was a tough cookie to crack. Adrian Jones says, oh, please don't mention Chad Morse. Justin Ashmore says, after losing a couple of heartbreakers against LSU and Missouri, then getting throttled by the Tide, I think we're thirsty for blood, Horned Frog blood. Do you think Franks will have another high-flying game against a Big 12 defense? I think Franks could probably have a really good game in his last time out. He's been banged up. He's had the rib issue. Hopefully he'll be nice and healthy. These young guys recover a lot faster than us old guys. Adrian Jones says she believes that they would have beaten Missouri if Grant Morgan hadn't gotten hurt. I think, that personal foul penalty in that game for crossing your arms, because you can't do this. How many times have you seen guys do that since this? I mean, you're like paying attention now, aren't you? And none of them get a flag thrown on them. But I think you're right. That was a turning point in the game. Let's see what else we got. Yeah, everybody wants a walk and talk. I'm doing it. I was just messing around. Hope everybody had a Merry Christmas. I'm just scrolling through here to see if there's anything else. Yeah, I don't want to get into any Julius Coates stuff. Hopefully they'll be able to bring him back with the team. I understand just dealing with some stuff. Gerald would be smart to come back, says Wilson would. I think so. I mean, I think, again, people get in a hurry to get out of here. A year is not that long. A year, I mean, at my age, a year is like a month. It feels like a month used to feel. Time used to go so much slower the older you get. And I think these young guys just see it a little bit differently. But, man, if you ask most people, you go back to a time in your life, as I said, if it's not just college, it's college and something else. For most people, it was probably the funnest time. It's like that unbridled time in your life. You never get a chance to do it ever again. You can do a lot of things again, but you never go back to college. I mean, unless you're an old guy, an old lady. Let's see what else we got. Wilson thinks they're motivated to not We are too motivated to not win this game, says Wilson. Steve Glenn McCure says, do you plan to walk and talk after the bowl game? You could walk around your neighborhood and talk. I'm going to. I guess I'll probably have to flashlight it, or I'll do in the backyard. I'll do something. But it doesn't work to do it the next day, because then I'm like processed it and come to terms with it, one way or the other. Hopefully come to terms in a good way. Billy Wooten says, how come Arkansas ain't mad at Alabama because they're good? Man, I'm not sure what you mean there, Billy. Stephen Wilson says, hey, it was a fun year. Wish Marshall would come back. Crossed arms on our sidelines. Come in late. You list the return senior wish. You can watch it, Stephen, on YouTube. You can watch it on replay here on Facebook Live. So I talked about it very early, Stephen, on the seniors. I want to thank Jeremy Clark from HornedFrogBlitz. Does a great job over on that side. If you're a Horned Frogs fan listening, then make sure you go check them out. Also appreciate Danny West for bringing his insight as well as recruiting information. And thank you to all of you for your questions. It's going to be an interesting game against TCU on Thursday, New Year's Eve, 6 o'clock from NRG Stadium in the Texas Bowl. Should be a good one. I think it's going to be a close game. All right, everybody. We pretty much wrapped it up. I think we covered all topics I wanted to today. Appreciate everybody for joining us, and be sure to give us that thumbs up if you haven't done so already. All right, everybody. Next time I see you guys will be after the TCU game for a walk and talk. This has been Trey Biddy with HawgSports.com, and we'll catch you next time.